Well, let's talk about all of that. So many people do seem to have adapted their own rules. Joining us now from our London newsroom is Dr. Max Davey, who was involved in the drawing up that guidance. Layla Preston is a parent and online blogger. Morning to you both. Thanks very much for joining us.
Morning.
Dr. Davey, let's first of all start with, is it OK for children to be watching screens? What are the parameters here?
It is OK. We don't think that there's a direct toxic effect on children's health from using screens per se. We do think that screens should be controlled, and I think a lot of the things that people were saying in the little snippet you just had were really sensible, and I think that's what our message is. It's actually up to families to make their own screen plan, according to certain fairly basic parameters. Children need to sleep, they need to exercise, they need to eat healthily, and they need to spend time doing things with their family, sort of activities together. Those are really important. And once you've done all of that stuff and you're in control of your screens, then it's kind of up to you.
OK, I just want to pick up on that word toxic, because that is the concern of many parents getting in touch with us, that it may be damaging. Is it that the research has not been done yet? You've just been looking at the research that has been done. Would you like more to be done?
We do want more research, but we also want better research. We want research which follows over time. A lot of the research is just a single snapshot of time, and that doesn't necessarily tell us an awful lot. We think there's actually quite a lot of research, and we're actually pretty confident that there is no direct toxic effect of the act of using a screen on a child's brain. There may be effects from displacing those positive things I've been talking about, and there may be effects, for instance, on a child's eating habits. If they're watching a screen at the same time as eating, they might not realise that they are full. But in terms of a direct toxic effect, we're pretty confident that we're not going to find anything.
Can we be absolutely clear, Dr. David, is there a link between children's mental health and screen time? Are you saying there's no link?
I don't think there's a direct causal link from the amount of screen time to the child's mental health. We have to remember that the rise in mental health problems in children predates this explosion in screen time that we're experiencing. So it's not plausible to say that it is due to screens.
No, but is there a link between the terminology you're using, a causal link? People were wondering, is there a link between too much screen time and poor mental health?
There is an association between a lot of screen time and poor mental health.
What is that association?
We're not completely confident, but it may be. So, for instance, the report yesterday from the University College London, the way we look at that and interpret that is that a lot of young people with poorer mental health use social media more, partly because the real world, the kind of in the flesh world, is tricky and difficult, and interactions in the real world are tricky when you are struggling with your mental health.
So if you've seen evidence of that
around.
in your report, if you've seen evidence of that, how is that not part of your recommendations?
Our recommendation was about the amount of screen time overall. We weren't intending to cover particular sorts of content, but of course we do have within our recommendations some thoughts about safeguarding and avoiding negative content on screens.
So, Layla, let's pick up on some of these things. Just so you've got 2 children?
I have 2 boys, 6 and 8, yeah.
6 and 8. So this is very much the world you live in.
Yes, yes.
What do you make of... I know you've had to look through the reports in more detail. What do you make of what you're hearing?
I think there are a lot of holes in the research, definitely. I do think personally, there is a link between anxiety and excess screen time, for my children especially. I do believe that when they are on the screen, when they're eating or when they're just before sleep, I notice that their brains are frazzled and they're wired. And these kids are only 6 and 7 years old. And I don't think it's the length of screen time that I'm worried about. It's more what they're watching. So I think more emphasis should be made on what people are watching rather than the length of screen time.
OK, and as a parent, I mean, some of the guidance seems to say that perhaps we worry too much, but you would disagree, would you?
I do disagree with that. I think it's difficult to tell parents like myself to not worry when we don't come from a world where we were born into social media and internet. I mean, I'm showing my age here now, but,
And that's picked up actually by some of the viewers. For example, Tony says, for 40 years ago, the same hysteria surrounded children watching television. A lot of the worries come from older generations that don't understand how to use technology and are threatened by change. But what would your response to that
Well,
be?
I mean, I work on my own magazine online every day, and so I'm using screen time and social media and internet all the time. that's not what my worry is. My worry is more what the content is, that, you know, there's so many different apps and games and shows out there that seek to draw parents in to, you know, with the promise of development, educational development and enhancement. But I think that's very dangerous to do that, because these kids, you know, they say that length of screen time is not that important, but have we got the evidence to show what will happen when they're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old? And if we touch upon the length of impact on screen time, what about physical implications like eye strain and eye muscles? Like, we don't have the evidence to show whether there is a direct link to this. And so I think you can't really say that there is no direct link to mental health and
Dr.
anxiety.
David, do you want to pick up on a couple of those issues? One of them being that, and this is being reflected in quite a lot of the messages we're getting from people today, which is, do you consider it evidence what Layla, for example, has just told you about what she's witnessed in her own children? Is that evidence, or in scientific terms, is that just anecdotal, so it's parked to one side?
We don't want to be dismissive of individual people's concerns. That's why our whole approach is to empower parents to make their own decisions on the basis of the best evidence. So she makes a point about bedtime and how they're frazzled and not ready to sleep. We totally agree. That's why one of our recommendations is that children don't use screens for an hour before bed. Because you're right, you need to have that wind down time. You need to process what you've been experiencing during the day. And if you're constantly experiencing new things, then you're not in the place to do that. Also, the light may be affecting the process of going to sleep at that very basic physiological level. So I agree with that. In terms of content, it is very, very difficult to regulate content. And I think what we need to do, well, all that we can do is give general guidelines. Obviously, we need to safeguard children from online exploitation and safeguard them from seeing inappropriate content. But beyond that, what we have to do is just look at what the evidence is. And at the moment, the evidence is that there isn't a direct toxic effect from the act of using screens, but that screens can interfere with the positive things that you want to do in your life. So they can interfere with the things you want to do as a family with your children. And so we need to get control of our screens. So screens, we should control our use of screens, not them controlling us. That's one of the big messages from today.
Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks, Leda. And thank you everybody who's been getting in touch. Mark on Twitter says, get parents off their screens. Maybe then children will understand the ability to communicate and interact with others can be just as stimulating. And actually, sort of on the theme as well, we are talking about some of this, about stress particularly with Rangan Chatterjee, the doctor. I'm sure he'll have views on this as
indeed.
well.
One of the themes he's talking about, a new book he has out, is about people spending too much time on social media, for example.
And also literally attached to their phones as well.
We're all guilty of it sometimes.
Sure, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.